train to London town.
The end of a year. The year my hands changed texture, possibly permanently. Each day a slow tide, delivering and taking, never in equal measure. A year that weaponized our joys, breaths of fresh air, the company of others, closeness, into dangers. I cannot bear to stand and talk with someone now. The masks, the eyeballing of the feet between us, it's too odd, too sad. I cannot wait to be alone and safe again. Alone is safe. In my darkest moments, I fear that will be very hard to unlearn. I miss a barber touching my head with two firm but dispassionate fingertips, turning it to the right, to the left, pushing it forward, pulling it back. I miss 4 quick fingers on my shoulder blade as I'm ushered from one space to another. A pat on the back after I've accepted help in a store. I miss the practical touch of strangers. Touch that meant nothing now means something. It has appreciated in value. Once, a man named Norberto at the Washington Heights T-Mobile slowly applied a screen protector to my new phone with what I can only describe as precise tenderness. "It's like surgery," he said. He had one long thumbnail that he used to shepherd out every air bubble. "No matter whose sale it is, they have me do this for the customer," he said proudly. He paused, shaking his head. "Would you believe there's a hair in there?" He pulled back the screen protector and started over. I watched his fingers then, and I think of them now when I look at my phone, which is constantly. When my mom found out she'd passed the bar, we were coming home and walking the mail in across the front lawn, and she tore open the envelope, turned to me, and said, "I passed!" And I dropped the sullen teenager act, and we threw our arms around each other without shame. My creative writing teacher in high school at our senior awards ceremony pulled me in for a hug, and she smelled like incense and coffee. She'd literally saved my life. In Provincetown, on one of the worst days of my life, trying to convince people to come and see my show, my friend Dan squeezed my shoulders and hugged me often. My friend Micah slaps my back before every hug and pulls me into an often too hard embrace. My friend Amanda claws the small of my back with every hug, and it tickles. My friend Travis hates hugs, and when he's ready for them to end, I always press my luck. My friend Greg gives hugs he should collect a copay for. My grandmother, on the swinging bench at their lake house while I read to her from her favorite book, the Bible, would pat her knees in unspoken emphasis and every now and then reach over and pat mine. It's been 9 months since I was touched with any sort of erotic intention, and well over a year since erotic intention I didn't pay for. Seeing as how I'm no longer attracted to skin, only PPE, I don't often operate at a deficit, but every now and then a pang gets over the gate. I didn't understand the point of an erotic massage until rather recently, when one booked on a whim finally straddled that line, that sweet, sweet line, between therapeutic self-care and are we more than friends high school by the lockers reverie. Will they or won't they? For 60 to 90 minutes, you are Ross and Rachel in the narrowest railroad apartment in Hell's Kitchen on a table still damp with Febreze. I miss it. Like live theater, sex work will be one of the last industries to bounce back, as both require droplets and crowds. Where's the telethon for sex work, I ask? Maybe this is it. Over the summer, I connected on Instagram with a handsome Russian yogi who leads morning and evening virtual meditations. He asked me to meet him outside for a distanced date. A kind of date I was familiar with long before the pandemic, but I dodged him nonetheless. "I've never had someone play so hard to get," he wrote, and I responded, "It's not really that I'm hard to get, it's just that COVID is easy to get." I finally did agree to sit 6 feet away from him by the Harlem Mirror in Central Park. I was so nervous and it was so hot that when I arrived I was pouring with sweat. "You're like a waterfall," he said. And I said, "Oh my God, you think I'm disgusting?" And he said, "No, no, don't do that. I am responsible only for what I said, not for what you heard." Isn't that good? I wrote that on a Post-it. A few weeks later, we biked the Central Park Loop together, and it was a beautiful summer evening, and he asked if I'd remove my mask so he could see my whole face. We knew what the other looked like, we'd FaceTimed and followed each other on Instagram, but in person we'd only been masked up until then. We stepped away from each other and, bared all, smiled and nodded, and covered up again and got back on our bikes. It was all very Jane Austen romantic formality meets Cormac McCarthy scorched earth hellscape. He's continued to have sex here and there in quarantine, which ultimately frightened me off. Everyone assesses risk differently, but, unless there's someone with a 6.5-foot dick that can just fuck me with the safe half foot, I'd like my very first global pandemic to pass the Bechdel test. I liked him, and still do, and hopefully after I get one from Dolly Parton and Dr. Fauci, he'll give me another shot too. One of my last massages was from a Brazilian masseur in London with an empty apartment overlooking the O2. He insisted on a minimum of 2 hours. He blindfolded me and spent 45 minutes undressing me, grazing each bit of unwrapped skin with his fingertips, his breath, his lips. My knees buckled. It felt wrong to have someone spend that kind of time on me. I once slept with a boy in Baltimore who said, "Let me make you feel good," and had to hold me down because I kept involuntarily snapping up like a binder clip, just completely unable to accept pleasure. Alone is safe. When did I actually learn that? The masseur lifted my blindfold and looked me in the eye. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Is that all right?" I started to cry. He put his arms around me and tossed the blindfold aside. He laid me down on the floor and held me and kissed me for the rest of the session. Early on in the pandemic, I got a WhatsApp message from him. "I hope you are well in the middle of all this chaos," he wrote. "Take this opportunity to get in touch with the people you love. The immune system works better when we feel loved and laugh. I hope you stay fierce during this tough time, and that you keep your heart warm." 4 days later, he sent me a link to his new OnlyFans page. "I don't know how else I will survive this crisis," he wrote. I subscribed. The end of a year, the year my hands changed texture, possibly permanently. The end of an essay I didn't really know how to write. Still don't. I'd wanted to be so far from home this year. And home was only where I was. Where I felt safe. I travel in what I can remember, which is a lot. The warmth of his arms on that rug in London. That older man's hand on my back in that gay bar in Berlin after I'd just fallen on the stairs. Bruno's pinky against my thigh in the bathhouse hot tub. The goodnight handshake from the bartender in Paris. My mother. My teacher. That night in Berlin when it was so hot, the bartender at Toy Boy Bar had us all carry our stools out onto the street. His elbow on my shoulder as he handed me another Aperol spritz. How drinking with strangers in a circle of stools in a foreign country feels like a kiss on the back of your knee while you're blindfolded. My grandmother. My friends. Someone new. And me, stepping far enough away from him to show him my face. Thank you so much.